There are intelligent, strong, beautiful women in here that have been here for 8 years because of family tragedies. It's the same like my case, a family tragedy.
Can you define family tragedy for me?
Yeah.
Obviously you were convicted of killing your kids. Where does that
Wrongly
disconnect?
convicted.
You believe wrongly convicted?
Absolutely, 100%.
Lori and Alex knew exactly when this murder would happen and where it would happen. They just had to make sure that Charles stayed in the house.
Spouses having insurance policies is not a crime. Collecting Social Security is not a crime. Self-defense is not a crime. A family tragedy is not a crime. It's a tragedy.
Right now in Arizona's family, it is one of the most closely watched trials here in Arizona and across the country, really. Lori Vallow-Daybell's murder trial has finished week number 1.
She is accused of plotting the death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, with her brother. Vallow claims that the deadly shooting was in self-defense. We have already heard shocking testimony and felt plenty of tense moments in court. Briana Whitney, you have been in there throughout the entire week. Let's start with day 1.
I mean, that was highly anticipated, right? So I can just tell you off the start, it is so competitive to even get into this courtroom because it's so publicized. It's such a spectacle. We had a photographer sitting outside at 5 a.m. just to get a spot for us with the media limited availability. And then the public is there. People have taken off work.
So it's first come, first serve in the courtroom?
First come, first serve for the media, and also first come, first serve for the public. And of course, then family is there. But that just kind of set the tone, right?
Yeah,
so many people were looking to see, what is this going to be like? You have Lori Vallow-Daybell representing herself in this murder conspiracy trial. And that is completely unprecedented. We haven't seen something like that in so long, let alone for a trial as big as this. But the prosecution and the state has been working on this as well. And as a lot of our viewers know, this is a crazy complicated case. I just want to set a little bit of the tone here so that people understand what we're even looking at before we get into opening statements. So Lori Vallow-Daybell was married to Charles Vallow. They were married for about 13 years. And in July of 2019, Charles Vallow was shot dead by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. At the time, they claimed that was in self-defense, and it was not investigated as a murder. Well, fast forward a few months and you start the saga of the missing children. Tylee, Ryan, and JJ Vallow, Lori's kids, go missing. Lori is off in Hawaii with her new husband, Chad Daybell, a doomsday author who believed in these kind of extreme religious beliefs. And nobody can find the kids. There's an all-out search for them. They're eventually found dead on Chad Daybell's property. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, also was dead. We knew Charles was dead from before, and so things started to be reopened here in Arizona. That happened in Idaho, but they lived here for a long time in Arizona. Now you might be thinking, why is Lori Vallow facing murder conspiracy charges when her brother, Alex Cox, pulled the trigger on Charles Vallow that day? Well, Alex Cox is dead too. He allegedly has died from health issues. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about that. But Lori is now the last one left to face these murder conspiracy charges for Charles Vallow's death. Of course, the state is saying that this was planned out due to religious beliefs, and Lori and her team are saying this was a self-defense shot. That is kind of the basics. It's hard to wrap this into an understandable.
Yeah.
Right. But you know what? The prosecution, the prosecutor Trina Kay with the county attorney's office really did a good job setting this up, because you guys, we all might know about this case somewhat. It's been highly publicized, but the jury, even just to select this jury, they had to find people that have no idea about this case. The jury has no idea that the kids are dead. I don't think they even know Alex Cox is dead. So they're listening to this testimony for the first time. The prosecution had to set up, why would Lori want her husband dead? There was a life insurance policy. She wanted to marry Chad Daybell, the person she was having an affair with. She wanted to go on with her new religious beliefs. And that kind of sets up the opening statements. I want to play those for you now. First the prosecution, and then we'll go to Lori Vallow herself in her own opening statements.
Lori Vallow created the reason to keep Charles from just leaving with JJ. Lori Vallow wanted to stop this intervention. Lori Vallow wanted to stop Charles and Adam from trying to take her Temple Recommend away. Lori Vallow, who wanted to be Lori Daybell, and Lori Vallow, who wanted Charles's money.
The evidence will show that Tylee came out of her room with a bat to protect me, her mother, from her stepfather, Charles Vallow. The evidence will show that Tylee and Charles fought over the bat, and that after a struggle over the bat, Tylee fell onto the ground, and Charles lifted up the bat to hit Tylee with the bat. The evidence will show that Alex then intervened to protect Tylee from being hit with the bat. He did not have a gun.
So let me explain some of that you just heard here, and this is why it gets so complicated. So she mentioned in their testimony or their opening statements that there was going to be an intervention. This intervention was going to be between Charles Vallow and Lori's brother, Adam Cox, older brother. So Alex Cox, younger brother, dead, pulled the trigger. Adam Cox, older brother, wanted to help his sister kind of come back to the mainstream LDS beliefs.
Okay.
There was going to be an intervention between Adam Cox and Charles Vallow to try to help Lori. They both cared about her. They love her. They want her to get better. They want her to be the best mom. They're planning an intervention. And that intervention was going to be on the day that Charles Vallow was killed. So that's kind of an explainer for that.
Okay.
Temple recommend. I know that, Yetta, you said, what is that? And it's something that a lot of us are learning within this trial, too, or some terminology that we don't understand if you're not part of the Mormon Church.
Right.
And so the Temple recommend is basically, her membership, so to speak, into the church. They noted in the trial that Alex Cox has been excommunicated from the church twice, and at the time of this, he was not going. He was not allowed. So they thought maybe if they took that away, that would be a problem, and she would realize what was going on and want to do better. And then you heard the prosecutor, or you heard Lori say they said that I created a way to stop Charles that day. Charles was going to pick up J.J. Vallow, his son, for school. It was about 7:30 in the morning. And at that time, Lori then took his phone. And the prosecution says that was on purpose so that Charles couldn't leave. He comes in, he's mad about the phone. This all ensues. Then you hear Lori talking about a bat. Tylee Ryan, her daughter, allegedly, according to her, goes and gets a bat from the room to protect her mom. You heard her get emotional in the opening statements. There's this struggle with the bat, and because they all allegedly feared for their life from Charles, Alex then goes and gets a gun, comes back, and fires in self-defense. So that kind of explains that. There's also a life insurance policy, and that becomes a big part of this too. As if religious beliefs aren't enough, then we have money. There is a $1 million life insurance policy on Charles Vallow. Lori was the beneficiary of that for a long time, and at the time of Charles' death, she thought she still was. Unbeknownst to her, because she was kind of having these somewhat delusional beliefs and there was some concern, Charles had actually changed the beneficiary from Lori to his sister, Kay Woodcock.
Wow. That is a lot.
I know.
To unravel, especially, I mean, we behind the scenes even question here, once there's always an update with this, right? Who is this and what is that and where are we going now? So I can't imagine the general public, especially with jurors, as you were saying, who have not heard a thing about any of this.
Yeah, it's confusing. And I was going to say just a little bit more context too. In the opening statement, the prosecution reads these messages between Alex and Lori, and they say, "Be like Nephi." What is Nephi? I don't know what Nephi. Now, people of the Mormon Church do understand, but it's this prophet in the Book of Mormon that ends up killing another person because they feel like they have to. And in the context of this case, be like Nephi, the prosecution is saying that's Lori and Alex kind of encouraging each other, be brave, be like Nephi, kill.
Right.
Go to that level, and that's how they refer to that. You'll also hear about a spirit named Ned. That's Charles Vallow. So Charles Vallow is Charles, but Lori and Alex believed he was a possessed spirit, and that spirit's name was Ned.
So there's the actual case, which is extremely complicated. For the jurors who don't know much about the case, which I don't understand how they wouldn't, but we're in Arizona, we're in the bubble, I get it. But at the end of the day, Lori Vallow is the common thread with all of these deaths, and that's pretty much what the jury is taking in. I got to ask you, and then there's the undercurrent of everything you explained with the beliefs, right?
Yeah.
A lot to unravel, as Vanessa said. So you sat down with her before the trial. What was that like?
Well, I was very nervous, to be honest. I mean, as journalists, right, you prepare for big interviews, but this is one where I didn't know what direction it was going to go. She'd only talked to Dateline before and Keith Morrison, and that was a pretty crazy interview. Kind of went all different directions, not a lot of coherence there. So I was kind of prepared for anything. But what I really wanted to know was, why is she representing herself? Because she's not an attorney, and she admitted to me she knows she's not an attorney. She knows she can't do the same job that an attorney can do. And I mean, she refers to this family tragedy. You heard it in the opening statements. She actually referred to that same phrase in our interview first, and I asked her to define family tragedy, because at the end of the day, you were convicted of killing your kids. I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. Didn't get to learn a whole lot more because her advisory council at that point stopped her. They didn't want her to compromise this case. And I understand that to an extent, but I did ask her a little bit about the zombies situation, because she refers to the dark spirits as zombies, according to her friends who have testified in this trial so far. And her comment back to me was, whoever said that was my belief system. And then her advisory council shut her down.
Shut it down.
So I hope to learn a little bit more on that. But other than that, she did actually answer my questions. I felt like she listened. I feel like it was not incoherent. It was there. And I learned she wanted a speedy trial because she doesn't like the conditions in the jail. She wants to go back to the prison in Idaho, and no attorney was going to take on her case in a short amount of time. She knew that. She respected it. So she said, all right, I guess I'm going to be my own attorney.
Did her counsel stop? Because a lot of times whenever we have these types of interviews, right, you have their attorney or their counsel who, when you're asking a question, they stop the journalist. You know, every third question, they're being stopped. Did you find that, or did you find as though it was pretty freely open conversation?
In the 25 minutes that we were sitting there, I only got stopped twice. And in some of those moments, they also said she may be able to shine more light on that down the road. So, you know, I expected that to an extent, but they also knew I was there to do my job and ask her more. And I think Lori actually respected that as well. Now, you know, we got some color in there as well, and a lot of people took away from that interview what they felt was a lot of narcissism, manipulation, things like that. But I felt like we kept her on track, and she said she'd been preparing, she'd been studying case law. She was, I think, a little nervous. As I told her, I said, this is a big case, and it's proven to be so. But she came as prepared as she could be, and we were interested to see how this was going to work. So it kind of started with the first testimony from police officers and firefighters.
Yeah, we want to get to day two. I have this one last question to ask you about that meeting, because as journalists, you know, you talked about how prepared Lori was, but you're prepared as well as a journalist. And that first contact, that first eye contact, I'm sure you were there first.
I was.
So when she walks in, what was the sense that you got before you guys even started talking about the facts of the case?
Right. So people might not know, I don't know why they would know. When you go into jail and you're doing an interview, I had asked, am I allowed to shake her hand? Am I allowed to stand up? You know, just as out of a courtesy to anybody I interview, inmate or not. I would typically shake their hand. I could not touch her, and I had to be seated. So it wasn't going to be a normal interaction of like, hello, my name's Briana. But she came in and sat down and was very smiley off the bat. Seemed to want to make some sort of personable connection right there off the bat. Made sure she knew what my name was and how to pronounce it, which she's also made sure in this trial. Every time she is cross-examining somebody, she makes sure to get their name correct, and seems to kind of show that to them. So she came in, I would say, relatively friendly. Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So much more to get to on this. We're just covering day one. Haven't even gone into Tuesday, because Tuesday was wild. So
well, there's all sorts of stuff. Where do you guys want to start? I mean, that's maybe. Well,
we're going to get to. We're going to go to day two in just a little bit, leave people hanging just a little bit. So we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes, Briana. So stick around. Thank you so much. Have so much information. And you will be able to watch the trial live when it picks back up Monday right here on Arizona's Family. We are streaming it every day on our AZ Family website. That broadcast starts around 10:50 in the morning.
All right, still ahead tonight in our special coverage here of the first week of Lori Vallow-Daybell's Arizona trial. We're going to recap where things stand right now. Plus, we're going to show you some of the most memorable moments from the week, including that cross-examination of her brother. All right, let's switch gears big time and talk about tomorrow. And our first alert weather day, more triple digits, Royal.
Yeah, indeed. We're going to have another day where we get to at least 100 degrees. That'll be a record for today's date. We got to 103 today. Yeah, that was a record as well, though not the warmest we've been this early. 103, 85 is average, so 18 degrees above that. The prior record was 99 degrees. Did that a couple of years ago, so we crushed that one. A lot of folks are wondering about Pat's Run, and they're worried about the heat. Well, it is going to be warmer than normal during the morning hours, but most folks are going to end with temperatures in the 70s or low 80s. So don't worry about it too much, but take it easy out there. And as all the officials say, listen to your body and hydrate up. Red flag warnings for the weekend, eastern and southeast Arizona, Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be windy and the weather is super dry, so the fire danger is going to be up. Tomorrow, our forecast winds by the noon hour are starting to come up in northern Arizona. And then during the late afternoon and evening hours, we see the strongest winds down in the southeast corner of the state. Pinal County, you are a part of the red flag warning, much of Pinal County. So here's our first alert 7-day forecast. Tomorrow, a first alert day, high of 101. We'll be in the mid-90s for Sunday and Monday and kind of stay in that range for much of next week. But check this out. Toward the end of the week, we're going to see temperatures drop back down into the 80s.
Welcome back. We are covering the Lori Vallow-Daybell trial. Monday started the trial. It has been quite the week with a lot going on day one, day two, and leading until all the way to Thursday. Briana Whitney has been in the courtroom each and every single day listening to everything that has been unfolding. And there has been quite a lot, starting with day one and then rolling all the way through the rest of the week.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, honestly, from just the start to where we are yesterday. And I'm forgetting who's on what days because we got through so many witnesses already. On one day alone, we had 5 witnesses. So you're trying to kind of keep track of things. But they definitely started with some of the Chandler police officers who were on the scene that day and also the Chandler firefighters. And they become really crucial to the case itself. So the real first big issue that came up in this trial was CPR. Was CPR given to Charles Vallow? Why is this important? Well, Alex Cox was on body camera footage telling the police officers that the firefighters that he had performed CPR. There's a 911 call where he's asking, and there's audio of him actually saying, okay, I'll give CPR, and getting instructions from the operator on how to do that. Well, this becomes an issue because the officers get there. They're under the assumption that Charles Vallow had already had CPR. The firefighters get there. They're under the assumption he has had it. And then they're looking at the wound and the blood and saying, it doesn't look like any CPR has been performed. And so I want to play a little bit of that testimony from the police officer.
Have you regularly heard while listening to the radio 911 instructing people on how to do CPR?
We have had PTI information when we're responding to a call that will tell us that they are either performing CPR or being instructed to.
So you've seen in the past that 911 is prepared to handle individuals who may not know how to perform CPR.
Yes.
And that's to help try to keep the patient's blood moving while you're en route.
Correct.
Ultimately, is it your opinion that it is unlikely that CPR was given to this patient prior to fire arriving?
Yes.
So that is pretty interesting. You had the police officers and you also had the firefighters there, and that really goes to the actual case itself. In terms of the fact that Lori and Alex also didn't call 911 for 47 minutes before. So Charles Vallow's laying on the ground dying for 47 minutes, and it's hard to know had they actually called right away and actually performed CPR if he would have been alive. So that was kind of the big first lie that came up in the case. But there was also the testimony about the position of Charles Vallow's body when he was shot. And it becomes important because of where the bullet struck him and then where the bullet lodged itself. And this is some key testimony from a Chandler homicide detective who was on the scene. But he's not just a homicide detective. He's also a shooting reconstruction expert. And that was huge for the case.
Were you able to draw any conclusions as to whether or not the evidence was consistent with Charles Vallow being laying on the ground when he was shot?
Very much so in the position that you see him. He was the second shot that entered the abdomen would have been where he was lying.
So that was Dan Coons, this shooting reconstruction expert. Interestingly enough, Lori Vallow-Daybell did not want him to testify as an expert. She wanted to preclude that. And now you can see why. So the bullet itself, the second bullet, was actually lodged into the floorboard. Why is that important? Well, he was looking at this reconstruction of the scene, and they had this really cool 360-degree view where they could see everything and kind of all the angles of every room and hallway that was off the area where Charles Vallow was laying. The way that the bullet was lodged in, Dan Coons found in his expertise that that bullet had to come from somebody who was standing a few feet away near the hallway area. There was kind of a round wall. He said the shooter would have been there and Charles Vallow would have been on the ground, the way that it lodged into him. Why is that important? It's a self-defense case. If Charles Vallow was shot once, was already on the ground, unarmed, and the second shot was coming from the shooter, in this case Alex Cox, who was standing up and Charles is on the ground, that's not a self-defense shot if that is proven to be true. So that was some key testimony for the actual shooting itself. Very important to the case. He was very good at explaining it. The fireworks testimony came the next day.
Yeah, it got very personal.
Right.
Yeah.
And very dramatic as well on that day.
Yes. So I was in the courtroom, and most of us don't know who exactly is going to testify each day. The actual witness list now is sealed, so we don't know. We had an idea based on past witness lists who may be called, but typically we don't know the order unless the family or an expert is telling, reporters or media that they are going to testify the next day.
So it's a surprise.
Yes. So we every time it says the state's going to go get their next witness outside, we don't know who they're going to bring in.
It's like who's behind the curtain, right?
Kind of. So the state calls Nancy Jo Hancock. You can see her on the screen right now. Nancy Jo is key for what happened with Charles Vallow the night before he died. So Charles and Lori have this estranged marriage, and Nancy Jo was under the impression that they were going through a divorce. Now Lori, on cross-examined, did not like that word. She said we were not going through a divorce, nothing. It is
contentious.
what it is. Quite contentious. But Nancy Jo had met Charles Vallow on an LDS dating app. Charles was living in Houston at the time. He was flying back here to be with JJ. He was looking for another home, planning to move back. Nancy Jo and him really hit it off, even from long distance. This is only for a few weeks, but they talk a lot. She learned a lot about what was going on with Lori and her beliefs and all the kind of the craziness there. She learned a lot about JJ. She really thought that Charles was a great dad. She was excited to meet him. So, when he was coming out for the intervention, those two went on a dinner date. And it was there that she learned about the life insurance policy change, that Kay was now the beneficiary. And it was Nancy Jo who actually suggested to Charles that she should tell Lori that she was removed from the beneficiary. And, you know, Charles was reluctant. He felt like there were some safety concerns and money and this. And Nancy Jo was thinking, if there's money on the table there, and if she thinks she's getting that, that could be actually scarier if it comes to safety.
What a conversation on a date.
Right. So, but they, you know, she had said they had had hundreds of text messages back and forth and had spent a lot of hours on the phone. So even though this was their first in-person date, Nancy Jo felt like she really got a sense of Charles, of like the things he was going through, things like that. So they go on this date, they have a great time. And they tentatively agree to meet up the next day, but they hadn't kind of ironed that out. Next day comes, and Nancy Jo asks, how was your time with JJ? Because she got emotional when she talked about how excited Charles was to be with JJ again, spending time. Doesn't get a response back. Checks in a little later, how's it going? Nothing. So she's thinking, wow, I really misread the situation. I thought we had this great time. We really hit it out. Yeah, she thought she got ghosted. For 6 months. Wow. She did not know for 6 months that Charles Vallow had died that next morning until she saw it on the news in December, right around the time that the children were missing and that was all coming into play.
Gosh, can you imagine?
No, I can't. Wow. So she's talking about the things that Charles Vallow had told her. You know, she was aware of these concerning beliefs. This is basically the state trying to set up that there was concern before the actual shooting, that this wasn't random, this wasn't just a heat of the moment shooting, right? So she's testifying about all of that, which means that Lori Vallow was going to be able to cross-examine her. And nobody knew how this was quite going to go. And I want to play a little bit of this. There's quite a bit to this, and I urge everybody to go watch the full testimony from Nancy Jo. But this is just an idea of a little bit of how this went between the two women.
He was under the impression you were having an affair, so him moving on was a natural effect from that.
And then you had no contact with Charles after that, correct?
Well, he was dead, so clearly I didn't have contact with him.
Okay. And it wasn't until you saw that he had passed away on the news that you reached out to anyone, is that correct?
Correct. I didn't know he was dead.
So at the 5 months later that you said in December, after that is when you contacted Kay Woodcock?
To express my condolences for her brother passing away and wanted to let her know that I had had dinner with him that last night and how much he loved JJ and how excited he was to see him the next morning. And just...
Thank you. That's enough.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting moment, too. So basically, she's in the middle of saying this, and then Lori's like, I'm done. I'm done.
That's a good question, too. You know, what's the point of that, right? What relevance does that have? To me, when I watch that, I think, her emotions just got the best of her. She knew this wasn't going anywhere, but she's got her right here. She's not going anywhere. Now's my chance to ask her whatever I want to.
That's basically what everybody thought. They thought this witness was the one that actually may have affected Lori the most, gotten under her skin the most. And I think, you know, it might have been a jealousy thing. It could have been, you know, Charles is interested now in another woman, and I think Lori really likes attention from people.
And this woman knows the situation. You know, that's key as well.
And, and so this was what was interesting about what you just heard there. That was after the lunch break, and it was right before that where Lori is like, I want to know every single thing that you've ever heard about me, and what was it specifically? And the judge quite literally sent the jury out of the room and said, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to crack open that can of worms? Because if you do, you are now inviting in the possibility of the jury hearing things you don't want them to hear for this case. Lori doubled down and said, yes, I want to know. But then we went to break, and either she had a change of heart or her advisory council said, maybe let's not do that. Came back, and those were the questions she asked. But before the break, what really got people was when Lori basically wanted to tell Nancy Jo, sounds like you came here, went on a date with my husband, and all you talked about was me. And I want to play what happened because Nancy Jo had a very memorable response to that.
Would you have gone on a date with him if he would have said he was married?
If I would have realized how married he still was, maybe not. But I just met for dinner. I wasn't sleeping with him or anything.
Do you go on dates with married men? So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
Ouch. Yeah, don't flatter yourself became a quote that a lot of people were using there at the courthouse. And in that moment, I was like ferociously taking notes because obviously we're preparing for our live hit. So I'm writing everything out and I hear that and I'm like, look up.
Does everybody's head
everyone
just
looks
pop
up? You're
up?
right. And you start to look at kind of the audience there and everyone was like, oh.
It's interesting you say audience because that's exactly what it feels like at the show.
What I didn't know though is I looked around kind of at everybody's stunned responses, but I couldn't see the jury, and I'm not sure if they reacted in that moment. And yet, just a note on the jury, because you said, who doesn't know about this case? It's a lot of older men, like 50s to 70s. So people who don't have social media likely, maybe aren't paying attention to the news, really maybe don't know about this case.
Don't know. That's it. And just to be clear on that, because you said she changed course after the break on this questioning, because that could have really worked against her.
Oh, yeah.
For
I mean,
sure.
Well, right. When she starts to ask what is everything that he said about me, that's now going into a lot of the religious beliefs, possibly more danger, possibly how she was as a mother. I mean, there's a lot there. And honestly, they're getting into it. We get into the religious beliefs this week when her friends testify about this girls' weekend where they were casting the evil spirit out of Charles. But I don't think that the judge thought, I don't think you want this to come from Nancy Jo, because Charles himself probably divulged a lot more.
So Alex Cox.
Well, Alex Cox is dead. Adam Cox took the stand.
I'm sorry.
It's very confusing, right? So Adam Cox takes the stand. That was another key witness in this week's testimony. And this is an interesting place for him to be in, right? Where he's testifying against his sister about his dead brother and the kids who were also dead. So Adam Cox played a very interesting role in this. He was living in Kansas at the time, and him and Lori, had more of a phone relationship than anything else because they hadn't lived together in the same cities for like a decade. But they were close, and they kind of talk about being close at one point in time. Well, when the religious views started to get a little bit weird, they all kind of distanced themselves. But Adam expressed concern to his family about Lori eventually. And he said he actually was kind of shunned by his family over expressing concerns at the time.
Really?
Which is crazy to think about now. So Adam expresses concerns. He is worried about his sister. And the only other person that really has, at that point, is taking a lot of concern about it too is Charles Vallow. The two of them had talked about having an intervention with Lori. They were going to come record her when they were talking about things and take that to a higher up in the Mormon church, play it for him in hopes that he might be able to get through to Lori, bring her back to LDS mainstream beliefs. That was their plan. And they thought, okay, great. And really sad, they showed text messages between the two. So Adam and Charles were texting all the way up until his death. And one of the texts from Charles to Adam was, she's going to destroy other families. Mine is already destroyed. I am so upset, and she might be gone forever, but I love her more than life. I mean, this was a man who was desperate to get his wife back to some sort of normalcy, to be a good mom to his son, too. So these two are trying to let's get her back into a better place. The morning of, they were going to meet up, right? Adam gets into Phoenix, and he was supposed to stay with his brother, Alex. He calls Alex, no response. Texts, no response. Nothing from Alex. So he ends up calling his parents, and he goes there. He has no idea where Alex is. Charles says he's going to go pick up JJ for school. He's going to go take him to school, and then they can talk later about how they're going to go about this interview. Right. He gets to the house and sees that it's not just Lori and JJ. Alex is at the house. So he texts Adam and says, Alex is here. And Adam goes, oh, that's weird. They're planning something. Charles goes in And Charles says, yes, obviously they must have been talking about something. Adam is texting Charles, asking him, how it's going. No response. Text him again, hey, we're going to go play basketball with whoever. Would love for you to join. No response. And at first, Adam is thinking maybe he's taking JJ for the day and they're just busy. I'll hear from him later. But never hears from him again. He goes to Tucson the next day with his son to meet up with a friend, and he's telling this friend, I feel like something's weird. Because they were texting. I mean, the read, you could actually see when things were being read in real time.
Instantaneously.
It was minutes between the last message being read from Charles to when he was killed. So he's in Tucson, Adam's there, and his friend goes, have you Googled him? And he's like, no, I didn't think to do that. So the friend Googles him, and that's when they see that Charles has been shot dead by Alex Cox. And so Adam testifies to some of this. I want to play a little bit of his testimony from the court.
Did you see with your eyes, or hear with your ears, or personally witness me conspire with my brother, Alex Cox, to murder my husband, Charles Vallow?
No.
Thank you. No more questions.
Did you believe that Lori was having an affair with Chad Daybell?
Yes.
Did you and Charles spend time talking about that?
Yes.
Was he kind of, I guess, in a tailspin? I'm not sure the best words to say from learning that.
Yeah, he seemed a little desperate.
So it was really sad. He wanted to help him, but he said when he learned of Charles' death, he was devastated. And then he looks at Trina Kay, the prosecutor, and says, I believed immediately that they killed him. And he was referring to Alex and Lori. And then you heard Lori cross-examining him there. Yeah. Did you see anything? Did you see or hear me? And that became her line of questioning for basically everybody of her family and her friends.
The case is already crazy. I can't imagine being at the center of the trial and the cross-examination and all of this. It's just got to be so mind-boggling for the people.
And we've only entered week 1.
Right. This is supposed to go about 6 weeks.
Wow. So a lot to unravel there. I know that you're going to stay on top of it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.